Hey everybody, welcome back to God's Plan Your Part. Today we are looking at 1 Kings 12 to 14. And we are officially out of all the wisdom literature we've been covering. We're back into kind of this narrative of the kings of Israel. And we're entering a really kind of unique phase in the kingdom of Israel in that it is going to split. We've been following Solomon's life. And now we're going to see how Solomon's sons fare as leaders of Israel. We saw that David's sons kind of all fought each other. They were not great at getting along together. Solomon rose up. Solomon led for some time. And when we hit chapter 12, there's kind of this issue that comes up where the people of Israel are saying, hey, Rehoboam is Solomon's son, how are you going to treat us because your father treated us harshly? Which is really interesting. We saw in chapter 11 that Solomon kind of fabulously fails. His heart is carried after all these false idols. He's building high places all over Israel. And now in chapter 12, we're seeing a little glimpse of how the people actually felt under him. They obviously felt like he was kind of a harsh ruler. They were not living in freedom in the promised land at this point, in peace and prosperity. They were in some ways living in bondage to King Solomon. So we get kind of this flip side of who Solomon was and how Solomon led. And so Rehoboam, his son, has this challenge. So he goes to these older, wiser elders of sorts, and he asks for advice, and they say, hey, if you're kind to the people, they will serve you forever. And then he goes to his younger peers, who are friends of his, for advice, and they say, you should actually be even harsher to the people of Israel so that they respect you. And so you get like a quick little window into at least how the author views wisdom at this time. And he's clearly stating that it is better to listen to the older, wiser people in your life. I think the Proverbs would support that as well. But Rehoboam does not choose that. Rehoboam decides to go with his younger friends, and he says, my father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. He says that his little finger is thicker than his father's calves. So Rehoboam basically is striking out in pride and anger against his people. And so that allows another leader, Jeroboam, to rise up and rule over the 10 tribes in the north. And so Israel becomes this northern kingdom that is 10 tribes, and Judah becomes this smaller kingdom that is kind of like 1.5 tribes. It's Judah and Benjamin-ish. That's basically just in the area surrounding Jerusalem. So now when we talk about Israel, we're talking about a divided nation that is warring with itself often. And it's a little bit confusing. I know like when we cross into this like divided kingdom era, it doesn't help that one leader is named Jeroboam and one leader is named Rehoboam. So Solomon's son Rehoboam is going to be the king in the southern kingdom of Judah, and this other guy Jeroboam is going to be the king in the northern kingdom of Israel. And so there are a lot more tribes in the north, but we're entering into this divided kingdom era. Now, what's interesting about this is that neither king seems to honor God at all. Jeroboam, as soon as he has power and influence and is reigning, he goes to work building false idols all over the place. He builds actually like a golden calf in Bethel and in Dan. The foundations of that golden calf are still in Dan. You can go to Dan today and you can see the foundation stones where that golden calf was set up. So we know that actually existed. We know that is a real thing that occurred, and people went there and worshipped a golden idol just like they did in Moses' day. And in fact, Jeroboam actually proclaims to the people that this golden idol is the God that delivered them from Egypt. This is exactly what has happened before in Israel's past. So it is very important to learn from your past and not repeat the mistakes that you've made in the past, and not repeat the mistakes that your ancestors have made in the past. Here is a great case for learning from history particularly Christian history. Like, we want to know the mistakes of our forefathers so that we do not repeat them. So Jeroboam sets up idol worship in the northern kingdom. He's setting up high places. He's setting up idols. And he's ordaining priests who are not Levites. The last time we saw that happen was in the book of Judges. And that was a signal to us that, like, just insane things were about to happen at the end of the book of Judges. And so Jeroboam is misleading the northern kingdom. And while Jeroboam is misleading the northern kingdom, Rehoboam is misleading the southern kingdom. Both guys are building high places. They're building idols, and they are encouraging people to wander away from God. And God does not take this lightly. God puts a judgment on Jeroboam. God's also going to put a judgment on Rehoboam. And basically what you see happen is, because these groups of people have bad kings who are not honoring God, God is not going to honor them. God is still dealing with his people through his covenant, and his covenant literally says, if you obey me, I will bless you and prosper you, but if you come against me, I will refuse to bless you and prosper you. In fact, I will come against you. And so we see that there's a lot of trouble and a lot of problems brewing here in this divided kingdom. The original audience, and by extension us today, we should be reading this in light of King David, wondering if God will be faithful to King David and his promise that he made to him, or if there's going to be an issue here and if he's going to judge these kingdoms because of their unfaithfulness. So it's kind of a developing dark time in biblical history as we read through these chapters in Kings. There are lessons here about what happens when you allow your heart to be drawn away to something that is not God. There's lessons here about learning from your past. There's lessons here about raising up your kids to honor the Lord. It is crazy to me, and you guys are probably sick of hearing me say this, but it's crazy to me that we lift Solomon up so high as so wise and so honored, and yet when you actually read the accounts of his life, he seems to have actually been not that great of a guy. To the point that his son, who he was training up and raising up as the wisest ruler in the world, doesn't know God and doesn't follow God. That doesn't seem very wise at all. And so we're going to be entering into this period of good kings and bad kings. We're also going to be entering into this period of, like, strong prophets, guys that are willing to fearlessly speak on behalf of God and confront what will become these very wicked kings and their very wicked wives at times. And it's just going to cause us to yearn for a time where the people will return to being faithful to the Lord. When I read over these passages, I oftentimes feel like it's very similar to Judges. There are times when the people allow their hearts to be drawn away from God. They encounter hard times. They cry out to God, and God raises up a faithful king. And then you just spin around and around and around through this cycle of descent. And ultimately where we're going to end up is that God is going to judge his people, and he's going to utterly destroy their kingdoms, and he's going to have them carried off into exile. In fact, we already see that the Egyptians march into Judah, and they steal things out of the king's palace, and they steal things out of they steal things out of God's temple. And so this is, like, shocking. This should be shocking to us because we've just been reading through how magnificent God's temple was, how incredible Solomon's palace was, and now you have this foreign nation invading the land and stealing things out of these incredible buildings. And it shows us that weakness is coming because the leaders are no longer faithful to the Lord. So as far as your part for today, man, like, be aware of the Christian history so that we can learn from Christian history. We can learn from the mistakes that people have made in the past, that we're not drawn into idolatry all over again. But also know that a nation tends to follow the heart of its leaders. And we need to pray for godly leaders, people who really honor the Lord with their decisions in a real and authentic way, not for like lip service, not for press, but really people who desire and ultimately have strong relationship with God, because it seems like people generally follow the heart of their leaders. And so we want to be praying for God to raise up strong Christian leaders for our communities, for our families, for our nation, and so that we can be people who honor the Lord. I think we have clearly been drifting away from God, and I think we would clearly benefit from having leaders who love him and follow him. So it gives you some food for thought today. It is, I think, sad to watch this descent. So we're going to get some high points, we're going to get some low points, but ultimately we are officially into the divided kingdom era, where there's a northern kingdom of Israel and a southern kingdom of Judah. And it's going to be interesting to watch these stories play out. So we'll be back again tomorrow, and we're going to be digging into Chronicles again.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.